Sup guys? Okay, so today's a bit of a rando video, still about books of course, everything books on this channel as you guys know. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Jaya and I put out content every Wednesday and Sunday that is book related, and we kind of read all different genres of books in this particular arena and realm. I really enjoy reading books and talking about books, and it's always so much fun to connect with a community that enjoys the same things you enjoy, and it's just been a blast talking about books to an audience that is actually interested in reading. That being said, the whole concept is, of course, community here on this channel, so I always love to hear your comments, and I try my best to respond to everyone as well. I love hearing about what other people are reading, recommendations, all of those things, because there's so much out there to read and so little time, so let's do it together. That being said, today's video, like I said, is a little bit on the unique side. We are basically going to be talking about random books that I have come across and read and thoroughly enjoyed that I haven't really seen talked about too much on the internet. And so I thought it might be fun to discuss some of those books, just to throw some things into the mix. Currently, I am wearing my House of Jupiter Be Mine Valentine shirt, of course, in relation to the Magnolia Park series. I am currently reading Daisy Hates The Great Undoing. So I am super excited about that. But as we all know, Magnolia Parks has been talked about to death on the internet, so we're not going to address that or anything about that book or what I'm thinking. Eventually, I'll probably do a Magnolia Parks series wrap-up as well, but not what we're here for. So coming back to the topic, which is random books that I've read that I've really enjoyed. And we have books from all different genres in this particular haul that I'm going to be going through with you guys. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is actually a young adult series. This is called The Ravens and the Monarchs. The first book is The Ravens. This is a young adult series taking place in a college campus with Greek vibes. And it just so happens that the girls in this sorority also happen to be witches, and they're dealing with crazy things that are happening in their campus and around them. It follows a cast of some of these really rich, trained for this, inbred in the lineage of the sorority characters, as well as talking about new characters that have heard about the sorority from family members but haven't really practiced the sorority life. So we have Scarlet Winter, who is, knows she's going to be president. She has been brought and raised up in this world of success and whirlwind, limelight life. Her mother is very powerful in the real world. Her sister is very powerful in the real world. And now it's Scarlet's turn to step into that role. So she comes with that background and kind of that pressure that's sitting on her to rise and shine in this college campus. And she has decided that she is absolutely going to be the next president of this group. But she also has a secret that if it comes out can completely destroy her. Then we have Vivi Devereaux, who is a freshman coming into college. She knows nothing about the college life or the sorority other than the fact that her mom was a part of it. Her mother is no longer with them. She's being raised... No, wait, I lied. Vivi's mom is around. I apologize. She is raised by her mom, but, kind of like hippie vibes, constantly moving, constantly changing lives, hasn't really had the experience of like true sorority life or sisterhood or like having close friends and relationships. And now she's thrown into this world where she can potentially join this sorority. And it is a very entertaining read, of course, being magic and mystical focused as well. There's a lot of dark magic that happens in the book, and the girls have to run around trying to fix the problem before it gets any worse. The Monarchs kind of takes up in the second year of the series, where the girls have now completed their first year of college in Vivi's case and senior year for Scarlet, and the new surrounding chaos that comes with that. So both of these books were absolutely great, and I do strongly recommend for anyone who's interested in a little bit of magic and mayhem in that college vibe setting, sorority girl vibes. For anyone who's interested, this book was written by two authors, Cass Morgan and Daniel Page. They also have other books to their names as well that have been quite popular in the past, but definitely recommend these for just fun palette cleansers. I think they're great for an October seasonal vibe as well. If you're a seasonal reader, or back to school months as well are probably appropriate for these books, but definitely do recommend. And I also just love these covers. Moving on to the next set of books. We have a book called Schooled. Now this book is written by Anisha Lakhani, and I can honest to goodness say this is one of my favorite books of all times. Hard 5-star contemporary fiction, written so beautifully. Basically, the concept of this book is that there is a teacher, and this teacher is a new minted teacher who has just graduated college in Columbia for English and decides that she's going to start teaching at Manhattan's upper elite schools. Can you imagine the craziness she sees? So this is a broke teacher who's basically joining Manhattan's elite most private school, and she has to deal with the challenge of dealing with these parents, the challenge of dealing with these kids, and then all of a sudden the private language of tutoring and what it means to be a private tutor to the rich and the elite. It is very entertaining. It has major Devil Wears Prada vibes in the sense that she gets caught up in this rat race of fashion and trying to like keep up with the Joneses. And you also have this like character development, character moment of coming into herself. It's funny, it's quirky, it's definitely female centered, it's definitely strong plot character. It's definitely rooted in this idea of what are your values, your morals, your ethics, and how much are you willing to give up in order to quote unquote fit in and lead the fast life. I can honestly say this piece was breathtakingly enjoyable for me. I actually read this book initially when I was in undergrad. So I'm about to age myself, guys. So I graduated from undergrad in 2014, which means I probably read this book originally in 2010. Since then, I've read this book at least 3 more times, and I will never, ever get rid of this book. I think it's just absolutely phenomenal. I also love this bag on the front cover. It reminds me of Henry Bendel, which I don't think exists anymore, but I adore this book. I also adore fashion. So for me, this was just a non plus book. It plugged in to my life perfectly. It was just what I needed as an undergrad, trying to navigate life myself. As a young adult and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in my future. And I cannot say enough good things about this book. Strongly recommend, guys, if especially you want something that's fun, quirky, great for beginning of the year, summertime reads, because as we know, it's July, June time frame, summertime, and then obviously August, September rolls around, you're going back to school. Perfect time frame for this book. It's fun, it's fast, it's funny. It talks a lot about the materialistic aspects of society and the rat race. It comments on our sense of values, morals, ethics, why we get into the fields that we get into in the first place, family pressures. All of those things are discussed in this book, and it's done in such a funny, quirky way. And I can honestly not say enough praise about this book. This is a hardcore 5-star read for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And while superficial when you read through it at first, I think there's a lot of depth and a lot of commentary on society. So if you are interested in something like that, whether it's just for the fun of it or just to, make you think, definitely recommend this book, Schooled by Anisha Lakhani. Next up, now we talk a lot about Stephen King on the internet, obviously. He is renowned for his horror, he's renowned for his thrillers, but a lot of times we don't really talk about his soiree, if you will, into the world of fantasy. And I have to say, Fairy Tale is surprisingly an enjoyable book. If you want to dip your toes into Stephen King and you're too nervous to read the horrors, if you don't want to read the It, and you don't want to read The Shining, and you don't want to read, Pet Sematary, this is a great alternative. You get a feel for Stephen King's writing. He still has a way of writing the fantasy, like scary stuff, the skeletons and the giants and all that thing, all such things in a very scary way, but not so terrifying that it's overwhelming. Very, very fun book to read. Coming of age book again in terms of the main character in this book. So basically Charlie is just trying to get through high school and get to college. He's had a hard upbringing. He's dealt with an alcoholic father. His mom's gone. His father is recovering, and they finally made it to a place where they get along. He's done things in his life that he's not proud of, but at the same time, he just wants to graduate, do something good for himself and for his family, and make it far in life. And so he happens to find out that a neighbor, Howard Bodwich, is an elderly man who is very surly, grumpy. No one on the street really cares for this man. And suddenly he finds himself in need of support because he sustains a fall and he injures himself. And Charlie steps up to the task of taking care of him. In that time, he also becomes very, very attached to Mr. Bodwich's dog. And so as this dog and Charlie go through a journey, crazy things are happening in the backyard of Mr. Bodwich's home. And Charlie decides he's going to go down the well to figure out what's going on. And that takes us on a rambunctious tale in a fairy tale world. And it's just such a fun read. It's exciting. It's fun paced. If I had to describe it, I would say it's kind of like that movie where the kid falls into the pages of the book. What is it called? The Page Turner? No, that's not what that book is called. So I think it starts out like a regular classic movie and then turns into a cartoon. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, please put it in the description box below, because I cannot for the life of me think of the movie name. Or like Spiderwick, where like basically it's a book come to life type of vibes. Or what are some other movies that are like that? If you like The Princess Bride, anything along those lines, that's kind of the vibe that this gives. So definitely fun, has some interesting quirks and turns in it. Definitely a more gritty fairy tale for sure, but definitely not horror and definitely not scary, and still a great way to experience Stephen King's writing. So for those of you who have not read Stephen King but are interested in experiencing his writing and his storytelling, especially given how celebrated he is as an author, definitely consider Fairy Tale. It's a great read and you won't regret it. The stack is getting smaller, guys. Next up, I have some classics. So I feel like everyone talks about Jane Austen and everyone talks about Charles Dickens. Now with Jane Austen, the books that I primarily hear thrown around are Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. For me personally, I think Emma is a beautiful book. I think this book is absolutely hilarious. And if you guys like Clueless or movies like Clueless, that is basically what Emma's story is. It's a woman who's grown up in a very entitled world, very sure of herself, very well liked, in a high position in society, kind of the apple of the eye of her father, hasn't really faced anything difficult in life, and considers herself a matchmaker. And it's basically her rude awakening and coming of age story as she starts to realize that society is not what it seems, and people have more depth to them than just who they date or who they end up with or who they are in society or how society sees them. It's also a devastatingly beautiful love story of childhood friends to lovers, and that's just so special to me personally. I love that trope. And so I ate this book up. I think if you ever want to see what inspired Clueless and other movies like it, this is the way to go. It's definitely a copycat tale of Emma. And that being said, I mean, we all know how amazing Jane Austen is. She's considered a classic writer for a reason. There's a reason that she was so celebrated in her time as well. While these women are definitely not suffrage women, it is very interesting to see these characters that have been written pre-suffrage, but still female characters who have strong minds and are capable of speaking for themselves, especially in a world that was dominated by men, and the idea that women only attained titles and power by being married to someone with that title or name first. So I will say that this book is a very enjoyable read. There's a lot of very interesting things that Emma goes through herself in terms of growing up, as well as commentary on society with this book as well. So for those who are interested in kind of getting into Jane Austen and they don't necessarily want to read Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice, this is another great option, and I strongly, strongly recommend Emma. Another classic that I do want to recommend is Wuthering Heights. Now, Wuthering Heights I have, but I didn't pick up the book, so let me go do that. Guys, I'm so sorry. But Wuthering Heights is also a great book. Again, talks about this dichotomy of different characters who are not that redeemable. Like, honestly, every single character you read in this book, you kind of hate. There's maybe one redeemable character, but even that being true, your heart can't but help go out to these characters. Yeah, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, your heart literally cannot help but go out to these characters. It is about jealousy, and it's about envy, and it's about pride, and it's about gluttony in all of its essence. And it speaks so beautifully about how convoluted romance can get. I think if there was ever a toxic romance story that greeted the world, it was Wuthering Heights. I think it's powerful. I think it's strong. I think it's captivating. It spans generations. It's fascinating to read. The way that Emily Bronte's brain works to create this book is insane. To be fair, I have not read one of the Bronte sisters' books, and I do have it on my list to read. And then Jane Eyre is also in its own right a very, very intense novel. For me personally, Jane Eyre was a little bit much. It wasn't quite my cup of tea, but there's something about those Bronte sisters, man. I don't know how they did it, but they pulled out some very, very interesting, gnarly stories that kind of have that dark twist to them as well, but really makes you think about the human dark side, if you will, and how certain emotions that are so powerful when convoluted and turned can become something so ugly when it comes from something so beautiful, like hurting each other, trying to get back at each other, one up each other, just because of the sheer amount of power that person has over your life, constantly trying to get that one up because you're so devastating in love with this person, but you can't have them. Think that. So if you guys liked Magnolia Parks, this is it. This is what you need to read. Coming up next, we have Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Now, this is my favorite Charles Dickens book, and that includes Oliver Twist. That includes A Tale of Two Cities. It includes, I do love The Christmas Carol. I do love The Christmas Carol. But I will say that as far as like full-fledged novels go, Great Expectations is my absolute favorite. Again, such a powerful speech and poetic story to the idea of falling in love with something ephemeral, whether it be beauty, whether it be money, whether it be status, versus finding rooted happiness in things that matter, a person's character, the job, the vocation that you have, building the right kind of community for yourself, the values you place in terms of what defines success is so poetically written in this book. I think it's not nearly as dark or as twisted as some of other Charles Dickens books are. I think it's not as sad as, say, like an Oliver Twist where you're following, like, the urchins of the London streets. It's not as sad as like Bleak House. This is definitely one of the happier Charles Dickens books, I would say. Not quite Christmas Carol level of joy, but still at least it has a happy ending when it wraps up. But I can honestly say I read this book in high school and it changed my life. I still think about it till date, and that was back in 2007. From 2007 till now, in 2024, I still think about this book. We've done projects on it. I talked to my friends about it. I have reread it. This is by far one of my favorite classics, and I would recommend it to anyone and everybody if you are interested in that kind of vibe and that kind of like depiction of society and just things to think about. I think anything that speaks to human nature and sometimes even the dark side of human nature that can just come up because of our fear of missing out. FOMO is a very real thing, or this idea that we have to attain a certain level or a certain position in order to be seen as successful. Definitions of success. It's all such interesting concepts. One of the books on my wish list to read that I have not read yet, which I'm actually hoping to get through this month, is Vanity Fair. And I know that kind of speaks to the same concept. Again, talking about fashion houses and things like that as well. And your girl loves fashion. I don't know what to tell you. I do. I know it doesn't look like it right now, but I do love my fashion. So that being said, coming back to Great Expectations, a lot of societal commentary, fun read, fast-paced read, very, very enjoyable. And the English is it's not too bad. Like, pray, said I, as the two odious casts with the twitchy leer upon them caught my sight again. Whose likeness are those? See, so it's not too bad. It's not like trying to read Shakespeare, for example. So I think as far as classics go, very easy to understand, very easy to read, and would definitely recommend Great Expectations. If you're not a big classics lover, but you're interested in trying, I would also recommend this for you. It's a fun, fast-paced read, and I think it's a great way to get into classics as well. Next up, now this book does have some clout on the internet, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. I know a lot of people mention Christina Lauren in passing, and I know a lot of people mention that Love and Other Words are some of their 5-star reads, but they don't really talk too much about the book itself. It's a childhood lover's rekindled story, and this book is like sunshine. This book will break your heart and then heal it. This book will pull emotions out of you. I physically cried reading this book, and I read this book in residency, so that was highly awkward because my attending just walked by and he's like, what the hell is wrong with you? And I was like, he's like, did something happen to a patient? I was like, no, sir, the patients are doing great. I'm just reading this book. And he looked at me like, all right then, and walked away. It was a known fact in residency as well that I was a bookworm. Every single time I walked in, the first thing that I would be asked by many of my attendings is, what book are you reading today? And it wasn't just in my department. It was in all the departments that I rotated through. So that also says something about my countenance. But what I will say is this book is beautiful. Another book that I talked about recently in a different one of my videos, which is my series videos, is Jojo Moyes's Me Before You. And I can honestly say that book will rip you open, tear you apart, and put you back together again. It was beautifully written. The concept of euthanasia is discussed so beautifully in that book. This book is all about love and innocence and how innocent love can be corrupted and what causes that. It talks a lot about trust and friendships and family, and it's just it's a beautiful book. Please read this book, guys. Please read it. Even if you hate romance, consider it because it's well done. Chef's kiss. Love this book. But like I said, it's had its moment on the internet, so we're not going to talk about it too much. The next 3 books that I want to talk about are historical fiction books. Again, focusing on female-forward characters that showed strength in their society as females pre-suffrage. So this is before women had rights to vote, before women had anything really that we have now, and them carving their own form of independence in a very male-dominated world. And that is The American Heiress and Victoria, which is a story of a young Queen Victoria, and Fortune Hunter, which are all written by Daisy Goodwin. These books are also stunning, guys. They're beautiful, beautiful covers. And if you're into that, like, just wanted to point out that they're beautiful covers. But the stories themselves are also so beautiful. You have women who are a little bit quirky and into photography. And then you have other women who were raised in America as the royalty of America and now have to go back to Britain and break into Britain's society of new money, of old money versus new money, old prestige versus new prestige. And then you have a completely separate book following a 16-year-old girl who finds herself in the realm of running a country and having to deal with it and having the entire world watch her love story and her growing up. And it's just poetically written, these books. I've been using that word a lot. I don't know why. I think I'm just like very moved by these books, and that's why I'm speaking this way. These all touched my soul to a certain level, and I'm not a big historical romance girl. And it's not quite Regency romance either. Like it's I would say definitely lean it more towards historical fiction. but just love these books and would strongly recommend. I do think that these are great for young adult and older vibes. Young adult, though, I would say at least like 16, 17 before you start reading these. But the world is beautiful, like, and it's so well written, and you still get the ball gowns, and you get, like, you know, that centuries ago, like England and America, when everything was still coming to terms, and these strong female characters. And so these are just, again, chef's kiss, books that have always stuck with me, even after reading them many, many years later. Next up, I have a thriller for you guys. So as we all know, Liane Moriarty is a very celebrated author. She has multiple books of hers that have been either turned into film adaptations or series. 9 Perfect Strangers was turned into a series with Nicole Kidman, I believe, at the head of that show. Then we also had Big Little Lies, which was obviously turned into the HBO show, which was very popular and very fun to watch, even for myself, who did binge watch that show, with, again, very strong cast covering with Nicole Kidman. And then it had Reese Witherspoon and another famous actress, Shay? No. She was the girl who was in Divergent. I don't know if that's helpful. But again, strong cast of characters, strong women characters, everyone with a secret to hide. Liane Moriarty is just really good at creating a tense atmosphere, a fast-paced journey that happens in the span of days, and really knows how to build that world. And this book, in my humble opinion, is the cream of the crop of those books. It's The Husband's Secret. This is the first Liane Moriarty book that I read after I read Big Little Lies. I was introduced to Liane Moriarty by the show, and so it was really fun to read Big Little Lies after watching the show and seeing the differences. That was unique. Usually I do it the other way around, where I read the book and then watch the TV show. But in this case, I actually had the opportunity to watch the TV show before I read the book, and that was a very interesting experience for me. But I can honestly say that when I read The Husband's Secret, this took me one sitting. I sat down and read this in 4 hours straight. I finished it that same day. I remember my boyfriend at the time was also like, bro, what are you doing? Because, like, literally we were supposed to be spending the day together, and I sat at the coffee shop and read the book the whole time. He was not very pleased with me at that time. Still recall that memory. But that's how good this book was. Hey, maybe that's why we broke up. My husband now, he's amazing. If I were to sit down and read for 4 hours, he would look at me and be like, you're a little weirdo, but you're my little weirdo. And he would bring me a cup of tea, or he'd bring me a cup of coffee and a little cookie, give me a peck on the head, and just walk away and let me read. And this is how I know he's my soulmate. But that being said, neither here nor there, I do think it's really important that when you read a thriller, it's one of those books that just sucks you in. It doesn't make it difficult for you to plug into the book and takes you forever to find that rhythm. This book grips you from page one. And I think the way the storyline goes, that conclusion in the book, what ends up happening with this story is phenomenal. I don't want to reveal too much about this book, but basically I'll read the back to you guys so you know what I'm talking about. Imagine your husband wrote you a letter to be opened after his death. Imagine, too, that the letter contains his deepest, darkest secret, something with the potential to destroy not only the life you have built together, but the lives of others as well. And then imagine that you stumble across that letter while your husband is still very much alive. Cecilia Fitzpatrick has achieved it all. She's an incredibly successful businesswoman, a pillar of her small community, a devoted wife, and mother. Her life isn't orderly and spotless as her home, but that letter is about to change everything, and not just for her. There are other women who barely know Cecilia or each other, but they too are about to feel the earth-shattering repercussions of her husband's secret. Already gripping. Just the back is gripping, but this book is incredible. All of her books do take place in Australia because that is where the author is from, so that's also a fun read. And I got to go to Australia for the very first time this year, back in March, and my husband grew up in Australia for a period of his life, and so that's a special thing for me. But I do think if you've ever lived in Australia or you're interested in visiting Australia, that a lot of these places might speak to you as well. But that's neither here nor there. For anyone who's interested in a fun, fast-paced thriller, definitely consider The Husband's Secret. Next up, I have a series which I feel like hasn't been talked about in a very long time. I don't know if it had a fan following on the internet back when it first came out. I don't know how big YouTube was back then. BookTube, Bookstagram, all these different booky things that we talk about now. But these books are precious. They are absolutely hilarious. They comment so much on society. There's so much to talk about with these books. And being of Asian descent myself, it was just very funny to read, because even though these characters are like bajillionaires and in a completely different tax bracket than I will ever be in, it was really fun to see the dynamics of Asian families. And so, of course, I'm talking about none other than Kevin Kwan and his amazing creations, Crazy Rich Asians, China Rich Girlfriend, and Rich People Problems. Now, this follows Singaporean families and a normal Chinese Harvard professor meeting the billionaire son and having to go to Asia and go to Singapore, so not quite Asia, to meet her possible future mother-in-law. And that's where this book starts. So Rachel Chu is a wonderful woman who is very well bred and raised well by her single mom in America as an American Chinese born woman who has a Harvard PhD and is a Harvard professor and is dating Nick Young, aka Singaporean royalty, without realizing that's who it is. And so he gets invited by him to go back to Singapore and go to his best friend's wedding. And in the midst of all this, she gets to meet the family. Obviously, chaos ensues. It's absolutely insane, but it is a phenomenal, phenomenal book. I made all of my friends read this when I first read this book, and then we all went and watched the movie together when it released. And I can honestly say the film adaptation was very well done. Book is better, in my humble opinion, but great, 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 great book. Definitely read. Second book in that series is this one right here, China Rich Girlfriend, following the monumental revelation at the end of the first book. Absolutely hilarious. And then last but not least, we have Rich People Problems, which follows personally my favorite character, Astrid, who is one of the cousins on Nick's side. And overall, just so much fun to read. Such a pleasure. Kevin Kwan crafts such beautiful, beautiful books. And I did read his most recent one, which was Lies and Weddings, and I loved that one as well. He has another one as well, Sex and Vanity. Now that one I didn't care for as much. It was like okay for me. That one was like a 2.5 stars, but everything else that he's written this is solid 5-star reads all across the board. And then Lies and Weddings was a solid 4.5 for me. So I do think that if you're interested in reading about crazy rich people and all the silly things they go through, ridiculous name drops, fashion drops, location changes all the time, because of course they have private jets and whatnot, but also reading about the relationships between Asian families and the hierarchies that are inbuilt into that, as well as questioning your sense of self, your sense of worth, and defining who you are, especially in a world that may not always accept you for who you are, whether it be of Asian descent, Indian descent, Chinese descent, American descent, Hispanic descent, whatever it might be. If you ever have a question mark of identity, these books really speak to that in their own way. And I just think there's so much depth to these books when you look for them, so much societal commentary, but I also think the fun, frivolous nature of the books is hilarious. And if you're just looking for a good time and for a book on fashion, this is a great way to go as well. So definitely, definitely, definitely recommend Kevin Kwan books, particularly the Crazy Rich Asians series. Next up, I have Stuart Tartan books. Now, again, Stuart Tartan, I feel like, is not an author that's been discussed a lot on the internet. He himself is known for coming out and saying that he didn't want all of his novels to have the same premises or the same background or the same vibe or the same feel. So I only know of 2 of his books. I don't know if he's released any others, but I can honestly say they were both very different from each other. Both absolutely amazing books. The Devil in the Dark Water follows the story of a bunch of people on a ship, and they're basically on their way on this ship, and Samuel Pipps is the main character. He's a detective and is being transported to Amsterdam for a crime that he may or may not have committed. And it's basically following him, Aaron Hayes, who is a bodyguard, and then you have Sarah Wessel, a noblewoman, You have a random character who shows up with leprosy who curses everyone on the ship. It's a whole bunch of interesting characters and just quirky vibes of what's going on. But basically, you're trying to solve a murder mystery while on a ship and trying to put to rest all the whisperings that are happening. Also, while they're on the ship, a lot of crazy things start happening during their journey. I realize I am not doing a good job of summarizing this book, and I'm kind of doing that on purpose. I want to keep it vague, but I promise you guys, if you pick this book up and you read it, you will not regret it. It's probably closer to a thriller. It's not quite a thriller, but it's probably closest to that genre. If anyone has read this and has a different genre that they would put it in, please let me know, because that's the closest one I can think of. But definitely a fun read. Outside of that, though, my personal favorite is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I love this book. I think when you first start reading it, it's a little bit hard to understand, but the basic concept and premises of this book is that a man has 7.5 lives to figure out who was the murderer of Evelyn Hardcastle, otherwise he'll be trapped in this new reality forever. So this man is basically trapped in this new reality, trying to figure out who murdered this person. Now, each day he wakes up in this new reality, he wakes up as a new character, meaning that every single day he has a different set of memories and different personality. Within each body, he has his faculties, but the higher up the chain he goes, meaning the closer he gets to characters who are intelligent, the closer he gets to characters that are more involved in the story, that have a higher sense and higher understanding of their sense of self, the more and more he loses himself. So while he's going through this journey, trying to remember his sense of self and figure out who murdered this woman, he also has to experience these different events that are happening throughout the day in the minds of other characters. There also happens to be another character in the book who's hunting him, who happens to be also waking up every day as a different character, and he doesn't know who it's going to be. Overall, very fast-paced, fun book. It can be a little confusing at first, so I do recommend having a sheet of paper next to you if you're like me and you just want to keep track of the different names and who the different roles are in the book, or if you want to try to solve the murder along with the main character. But this book was incredible for me. It was such a unique premises, and I really enjoyed it for that reason. I also think Stuart Turton just wrote it beautifully. I think in terms of all the events that happened, it's easy to follow, it's easy to understand. And so I would definitely recommend this for anyone who's looking for, again, a fun, fast-paced, easy read. If you are a mood reader, definitely recommend this for more fall time. I think the vibes for this are perfect. And if you want to light a candle and you want to sit down with your big cup of tea and you want to just read, it's the way to go. Definitely recommend. Next up, so we talk about TJ Klune a lot, but we talk about TJ Klune in regards to The House in the Cerulean Sea. Sorry about that. The House in the Cerulean Sea. Now, The House in the Cerulean Sea is absolutely wonderful. As you may know, TJ Klune has also written many other books, and so I personally wanted to talk about this one, which I feel like is not spoken about as much, and it's Under the Whispering Door. One thing to realize about TJ Klune is that he does write primarily gay romance stories, so homosexual character, which I think is done beautifully. Like the way he writes the characters, the way he talks about their experiences in society, their coming out, their understanding of who they are, their appreciation of their attraction to these other characters, whether they be bi or, you know, trying to pass off as straight initially or whatever it might be. Their journey in that itself is beautifully done. And this book was no different. I loved reading the romance in this book. I loved it. I think it was very subtly done. It was very beautiful. It wasn't the overpowering arch of this book, but it was just so necessary to the plot line at the same time and the level of trust that the main character develops. I think it was also a great read just because of the fact that you get to see someone who's like basically Ebenezer Scrooge grow up and turn into this loving, heartfelt human being. You have a cast of quirky characters and it's just worth the read. But basically, Under the Whispering Door talks about a story of characters that are in the in-between. They have passed on from life, meaning they have passed away, but they haven't quite made their journey to heaven yet. And so they're staying at the Whispering Door Cafe, where they get to have a cup of coffee or food or whatever and basically address any regrets or concerns that they might have before they move on to the next stage of their life. And it is in that setting that we have our main characters. So let me read the inside to you. Welcome to Sharon's Crossings. The tea is hot, the scones are fresh, and the dead are just passing through. When a reaper comes to collect Wallace from his own funeral, Wallace begins to suspect he might be dead. And then Hugo, the owner of a peculiar tea shop, promises to help him cross over. Wallace decides he's definitely dead. But even in death, he's not ready to abandon the life he barely lived. So when Wallace is given 1 week to cross over, he sets about living a lifetime in 7 days. Hilarious, haunting, and kind, Under the Whispering Door is an uplifting story about a life spent at the office and a death spent building a home. So beautiful, beautiful book. Made me cry, made me laugh, made me smile, made me giggle, did all the feels, did all the things with this book. I will say House in the Cerulean Sea is one of my absolute favorite books by TJ Klune, and I cannot wait for its sequel to come out. It is coming out, I believe, in October of this year. And so I've already pre-ordered it. I'm waiting for it. I'm so excited to read it. But I can honestly say Under the Whispering Door gave me the same vibes, and it's a beautifully written book, and I don't think it's talked about enough on the internet. So if you are interested in something along those lines, definitely recommend it. If you are also looking for, man-to-man relations, this is a great way to go. And it's divine. The book is just divine. Definitely worth reading. Last but not least, I wanted to talk about a young adult author again. Now this author has written many, many, many books. Pardon me, guys. I personally discovered this author when I was still in high school. And since then, I have religiously read every single book that she has released. I have my fan favorites, and I wanted to talk about those. Some of these have been turned into TV shows as well, so I'm sure you might recognize some of these titles. The first and foremost one is Sarah Dessen's Along for the Ride. This book is like sunshine. Every single one of these books are coming of age stories, and every single one of these books has wonderful male characters that do help the female characters kind of find themselves. So there is that little bit of push there. It's adolescent stories of women growing up, all taking place with these girls either being in 11th or 12th grade. And it's just lovely. They're poetic books. This one is, I think, the best at depicting what it feels like to live the life of a child that is forced to grow up too quickly because you have watched your parents be children their whole lives. So it's the story of this girl who is living with her single mother, who happens to be a professor, has obviously pushed the main character in this book, Auden, to also follow her footsteps. So she's a straight A student. She's in every single club. She's like the next best pick to go to college and make a name for herself. In the midst of all of this, in the summertime, she has to go visit her dad, who has married a new woman who is the complete opposite of her mom, cheerful, bubbly, has a clothing store and a baby on the way. Not a baby on the way, a baby that has come. And Auden is on her way to spend her summer with her stepmom and her father, and to try and bond with her dad, who has been present yet absent her entire life, and try to reconcile the fact that she's on her way to college and she has a baby sister now, and also try to figure out how to get close to her stepmom, who's trying so hard to be a part of her life, while Auden's just trying to find a way to keep her at bay and at arm's length, while also trying to reconcile the fact that she hasn't really had a childhood. Beautifully written book. Not your classic young adult book. I think a lot of young adult books get a lot of slack because a lot of people look at them and think, oh, they're young adult, there can't be much depth to them. But I'm here to tell you that every single one of these books are beautifully written. I remember I shut up one of my classmates real quick when we were in medical school because he asked me, oh, Jaya, what are you reading? And he was obviously trying to get a rise out of me at the time. I know this because I know him, and he's a wonderful person, and he's hilarious and happily married, and I love him to death. But he had once asked me, like, what are you reading? What's it even about? And he was definitely going for that vibe of, oh, young adult, like, what BS are you reading? And I described the concept of the book and why I was reading it, and he got quiet real quick. In fact, eventually he was like, maybe even I'll take a look at that book. So I can honestly tell you there's something in these books for everybody. So please, 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 if you are in the mood for reading that type of vibe, pick it up. It's a fun, fast-paced read. The words are big, the chapters are small. It's great summer read. Like literally, if you sit on the beach and you read this book, it's perfect for that. So would definitely recommend Along for the Ride. And the next one I have by Sarah Dessen that I recommend is Saint Anything. This one's a little bit darker. This is following the story of the younger sister who has an older brother who gets into trouble a lot. He's currently in jail and trying to, post bail and come back home. Things just got a little out of hand. He's not a bad guy per se, but he's a handful. And so her parents are constantly focused on him, and she's trying to navigate that world and also deal with his sketch best friend and his so-called girlfriend, and also deal with trying not to overwhelm her parents while still finding a sense of self for herself. And I can honestly say this book touched my heart. It was a beautiful, beautiful read. It was thoroughly enjoyable, and I ate it up like a little piece of cake. It was great. Another one that I really enjoyed is Just Listen. This is about a female protagonist who was popular. Before she was popular, she was not popular. And then the repercussions of speaking out. So terrible thing happens to her. She says something, it blows back in her face. She suddenly finds herself friendless and alone, has to deal with the consequences of that. She also looks back at her past and thinks about the choices that she's made, how she has had relationships that have fallen apart with people that were very important to her, dear to her, in the name of popularity, and just what it means to be a teenager in today's world. In the midst of all this, she also runs into Owen, who is a wonderful, wonderful kid who has some anger management issues and is currently working on his anger management issues, and has a house full of crazy little girls all the time because of his younger sister, is super, super close to his mother, and practicing true honesty, and something that's a foreign concept to her because she's not someone who speaks out and speaks her truth. And it's just such a wonderful story. I was also just very inspired by this cover when I was younger and I was in high school. I loved the shirt and the jeans and the headphones in particular. The headphones always spoke to me. Like, I love how cute those are, those pink and white headphones. And I mean, if you see my Apple headphones now, the green with the pink, you probably see where those vibes are still there to a certain extent. So 16-year-old me was not much different than I am now. But again, Sarah Dessen just has a way of telling a story that's so beautiful, and would definitely recommend this book. This one is my personal favorite. It's The Truth About Forever. Again, following a girl who has everything going for her, very popular, good grades, kind of a wallflower though. She ends up becoming a wallflower after being a champion runner because she watches her dad die. She's there, she sees it happen, it's miserable, and she's just kind of on deer in headlights mode and just trying to get through the next day. Her mom really struggled with her older sister, and so she kind of took on the role of just being this perfect little girl. And she's padding her resume. She has, quote unquote, the perfect boyfriend. She has the perfect job. Everything's looking up for her, but she's miserable because she has lost her voice. And this book basically puts her in a position where she ends up at a job at a catering company. And that catering company is primarily family run with close family friends. And they are insane. They are nuts. Their kitchen is half the time falling apart. It has such a quirky group of characters. But she is allowed to be herself, feel her truth, and experience the sense of coming into herself in this book. And I just think it's written so beautifully. What I can honestly say about all Sarah Dessen books is every single one of them is very deep. Every single one of them has a lot to say. I will say her original books were not her best works of art, but I think that's common. You often find that as writers write more books, their maturity definitely is more seen in the books, and you can see that the language and the style of writing the novel changes. I will say a lot of her middle books are my personal favorite. Another one that's absolutely excellent that's sitting in that pile right there is Lock and Key. Lock and Key is also an excellent book about a girl whose mother just basically abandons her. She's trying to raise herself almost gets put in the foster system and then ends up with her older sister. And it's about her overcoming her anger from the abandonment of her mother, as well as the feeling that her sister left her initially, and now finding this newfound sense of family and connection with her sister and her sister's husband, while also falling for the boy next door who's living in his own hell and torture, but is also one of the happiest kids on the planet. And it's just such a heartbreakingly beautiful novel. You have the prickly girl next door with the happy sunshine boy next door, and you never know what's actually going on in someone's life until you walk in their shoes. And I just think that book is also beautifully done. Overall, what I will say about all of these books is many of them are standalones. They're very fun to read. Obviously, Crazy Rich Asians is a series. That's one that I do recommend reading as a series. But for the most part, most of these books are standalones that you can also read. And I just felt like they needed to be discussed because a lot of people have not talked about them on the internet, that I've seen at least. Another one that you have to read as a series that I talked about today was The Raven and the Monarchs, because that will not make sense unless you read it as a series. But outside of that, all these books you can grab and go and just jump into this new world and experience these new roles and these new roles as characters. And I can honestly say that I don't think you'll be disappointed with any one of them. That being said, thank you so much for joining me today. I know this was a long one, so I hope you guys got something out of it and you enjoyed it. If you did stick around from start to finish, thank you so much for staying. And please comment below if there's any books like these that you absolutely adore and love and recommend to anyone and everybody that you haven't necessarily seen on the internet. And I'd be happy to pick it up and read it. Or even better, tell me if you have read one of these books as well and what your thoughts are on them. That being said, I put out videos every Sunday and Wednesday. So I do hope that if you enjoyed our bookish chat today and you want to be a part of this bookish community, that you would consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. I do hope to see you guys again, and I can't thank you enough for spending time with me and sharing my obsession with books. Until next time, bye guys.